Good morning. Welcome to Church of the Crossroads. We are in, actually last week we started this new sermon series entitled We Are. It's a sermon series about our vision. And we're kind of dreaming about who as a church we want to be, what kind of church we want to be, how we want to be known, that kind of thing. It's our preferred, the sermon series is about kind of our preferred future, where we're going. And so last week we talked about compassion. We are a church that is irrationally compassionate, so we go out of our way to look for and to show up for people in need, in pain, to offer help and comfort and be a neighbor and love them like Jesus loved us. And I shared with you this statement last week. I wrote this back in the summer of 2017, 3 or 4 months before we actually started a church. It was when I was kind of dreaming about, I didn't know at the time, but I was dreaming about you, dreaming about this time and this place and who we would be. And it's gone far faster and gotten far bigger than I even dreamed. So my dream was pretty small, actually. But this was kind of what I came up with for our vision as a church. We want to offer irrational compassion. We want to be a church that unconnected people enjoy attending, and we want to be a church that expects God to do big things. So last week we talked about that first statement. Today I want to talk about that middle statement. We are a church that unconnected people enjoy attending. Like that's our preferred future. That's part of what we hope to be. So like during the week, you're crossing paths with people out there, right? In your neighborhoods, in the city, when you're at work, wherever it may be. You're talking to your friends, you're sharing your story and your relationship with Jesus Christ, your journey with Jesus and how Jesus has transformed you. So then at some point, you either come to a place, as you're sharing with them, you come to a place where you invite them to hear, or they ask if they can come with you here. And so we want this to be something, we want this gathering to be something that you're excited to bring them to. And for them, it's worth coming to, like it's worth their time. They get something out of it. And so in order to help us understand, that, this morning I want to share with you a fictional story that I wrote, if I could, right? It's a short story, I promise. Story time at Church of the Crossroads. Would that be okay? And if you were on my launch team 2 summers ago, you remember I shared a fictional story with you about a fictional character named Crossroads Chris. Does anybody remember that story? Okay. So Crossroads Chris is still alive, and here's his story to this point. Right? It's just story time at Church of the Crossroads. Okay. Here's the story that I wrote. It's probably lame. All right. So Crossroads Chris is his name. He is 27 years old. The last time he attended church was 15 years ago with his grandmother when he was 12 years old, and it was boring. He was unimpressed, even turned off a little bit. Now, 27 years old, Crossroads Chris is a college grad. He's married and has 2 small children, 2 girls actually, to be specific, 3 years old and 8 months old. So he and his wife have achieved or are moving quickly toward achieving the American dream, but something is missing. He and his wife have decided they want to raise their children differently and are looking for purpose and looking for direction. They're looking for something more. So they decide to investigate church again, try it again. And they've heard about a new church in town that meets in a school. Sounds unique, sounds pretty weird, but sounds unique, sounds like it's going to be worth giving a try. So Sunday morning comes. Chris and his wife get up early. They get the girls up. They get the girls' hair combed, clothes changed, and they get them fed. They get them locked into their car seats in the van. They arrive, Chris and his family, in the parking lot, nervous. Scared is a better word. And they arrive at the same time frustrated because their 8-month-old is fussy and their 3-year-old spilled milk and Cheerios all over the van floor as they pulled in. Anybody had that happen? So cleaning up the mess in the parking lot makes them late. It's now 10:03. The service started at 10. Service has already started. So Chris and his wife get the mess cleaned up. They get out of the van with the girls, and as they're walking toward the entrance, they are completely unsure of what they're walking into. So they're not sure this is going to be worth it, but they're willing to take the risk this one Sunday. For them, it's go time. Like, will they find what they're looking for? So as they walk into the front door, it's now 10:05. They are met by one of our greeters, okay? Now, I've changed the names to protect the innocent here. So this is a fictional character. We're going to call the guy Troy, okay? It's a different Troy than our greeter out here. And the fictional Troy is the leader of the greeters out here. It's a whole different story than our story, okay? Troy is the name of our team leader of greeters here. But this is a different Troy, fictional Troy, okay? So I just made up that name. So he's actually the team leader of the greeters, and as Chris walks in, Troy meets them with what's about time. Service starts at 10, bro. You're late. Chris and his family, now feeling embarrassed, pick up the pace. They're feeling even more awkward. In the lobby, once they reach there are no directional signs. There's no one to tell them which way to go, but the website said this church had an area for preschoolers and infants. So they spend another 5 minutes wandering the hallways until they hear the sound of kids playing. As they walk up to the preschool room to drop off their oldest daughter, the one exhausted and agitated lady in the room with 12 preschoolers sees them and says to them, with a cigarette hanging out of the corner of her mouth, she says to them, "Oh Lord, not another one. Jesus, take me now." Takes out her cigarette, blows out the smoke, and with a huff she says, "Well, send her on in, I guess." And they do. They go across the hallway to drop off their 8-month-old. In that room, same thing, there's one lady, she's sitting in a rocking chair, and there are 15 babies laying on the floor. She says to Chris and his wife, "Just lay her right down there in that other pile of crawlers right there. She'll be fine, I got this." And then she goes back to reading her novel. Now, go with me. This is fictitious. Remember, no one would do that. No one would leave their kids in that situation. That's not happening back there. I promise. But go with me. So they drop off their infant daughter, and they find themselves again in the maze of the building, already late, in the building, but not sure where to go in the building, not sure where everyone is, no one to ask, no one to help, not sure which way to turn. They finally hear a song strike up, and so they follow the music, assuming that's the way to go. They reach the gymnasium door. They open the door, and immediately as they step in, the music stops. And everybody stops singing, and the whole auditorium turns and stares at them as they walk in, right? That would be your worst nightmare, wouldn't it? That would be mine. So let me rewrite that because I couldn't figure out how to start the music back up. So let me rewrite that part. So they come to the gymnasium door. They open the door, and when they walk in, an usher rushes up to them and says to them, "Try not to be late again." And then he walks away. So the place is packed from where they're standing, so they can't find a seat. So another 3 or 4 minutes of walking around the fringes, up and down the aisles of a strange place with strange people staring at them. They finally find 2 empty chairs, but not together. One over here, one over there. So they finally find seats, but they have to split up and sit among strangers alone. At some point in time, the preacher steps up to the stage. He's in a suit and tie, very formal. Seems like a well put together guy. By the way he dresses and fixes himself up, he's got to be a preacher chosen by God, Chris thinks. He's very sharply dressed. Then the preacher begins to preach, and Chris can't put his finger on it. He's thinking about it for a while, and the preacher keeps preaching. He's like, "Man, this guy seems angry at me and above me, like an expert, like he's got it all together and is just trying to help Chris and everyone else get it together, almost talking down to the people there. At the same time, this guy sounds pretty smart, this preacher, because there are a lot of words he uses that Chris has never heard before. And the people must be pretty smart too, because as the preacher preaches, he makes the assumption, he says things like, well, you've heard this story before, or you've read this verse before. And Chris thinks, no, I've never heard that before. I have no idea what you're talking about. The service ends with a long prayer, very long prayer, and a song, and the worship leader says, we're glad you're here. Come back next week, but don't be late. After service, Chris and his wife meet up. They find each other again, and they begin to meander through the gymnasium to find the gymnasium door. And as they're meandering through the crowd, they came expecting to be talked to by other people. As uncomfortable as that would be, they came expecting someone to at least say hey, or say, hey, is this your first time? Are you new? That was going to be uncomfortable for them, but they expected it. What's more uncomfortable, though, is absolutely no one says anything to them. No one. Stunned. They leave the gym. They go to pick up their kids, hoping they're still alive. Their 3-year-old is picked up, and she has gum in her hair. Their 8-month-old daughter, well, she's right where they left her, except now she has a poopy diaper and is crying profusely. As they pick her up and walk out the room, the lady in the rocker, without looking up from her novel, says something. Chris and his wife think, someone finally speaks to us. And they lean back into the room before they leave and say, thank you for watching our daughter. Now, what did you say? And she said, I said, see ya. Chris and his wife go home. They sit down to lunch, and they begin to discuss their Sunday morning church experience. And both are excited and can't wait to come back. They found a new church home. The end. All right. Now, I've never been to a church where all of that is true, but I have been to churches where some of that is true. Have you? And some of you have gone to church, gone back to church for the first time, or gone to church for the first time, and you've had the feelings of Chris and his wife, right? This intimidated, scared, confused, don't know where to go. Is anyone going to talk to me? Kind of that. We've all kind of had that first time going to church experience. We want this Sunday gathering to be something that you are excited to bring your friends to. Something that complements what you've been doing out there with the gospel in the past week. Does that make sense? Like, I want to be a part of a church on Sunday mornings where I get something out of it. I want to enjoy it. I want to get something out of it. But more important than my own preferences, I want to be a part of a church that my unconnected friends will enjoy attending or appreciate. Like, even if this is your first or second time visiting, like you're investigating church, you're suspicious of church, I may preach or say something that you do not agree with. You may not believe any of it, but the kind of church where you might think, but I'll come back anyway. I'll come back anyway. Because you're not going to offend me if you don't agree with everything I say. It doesn't offend me. It's okay to not agree with me. And so in this story in this fictional tale that I told, what's missing from the story? What's missing from the story that I so terribly wrote and told? What's missing is people. What's missing is loving people. What's missing is relationships. People who are looking to build or who are intentional about building relationships with one another. It's also missing directional signs, but that'll be another sermon. Back in the summer of 2017, before we had our first official Sunday, right? 3 or 4 months before we had our first official Sunday, I'm dreaming about this Church of the Crossroads. I'm thinking through who we need to be, ought to be, how we are going to be a unique church compared to other churches in our surrounding areas. And so I described it, so I had to kind of write some script for our website. And I described us on our website like this: Church of the Crossroads isn't a building or an event. We are a gathering of people in pursuit of Jesus Christ. Some of us are just getting started. Some of us have been away from church for years. And some of us have been pursuing Jesus for a long time. Many of us are unsure and have questions, while others are overcoming pain, loneliness, brokenness, and shame. But all of us are pursuing Jesus together. He's our hope. And we believe there's hope for everyone. It's about people first. It's about relationships first. We build relationships with one another. We look out for one another. We show up for one another. And as we grow our relationship, in our relationship, we are pointing one another toward Jesus Christ, the greatest relationship of all. So if you right now are just committed to attending here once a week, and that's all you're ready to commit to, that is okay for a while. But I want you to consider, if just coming on Sundays is all you've got in you to commit to, I want you to consider this. I want you to consider Sunday mornings an opportunity to meet people and build relationships, rather than this just being a religious activity that you check off your list and feel good about doing. See, if you've been attending for a while and you consider this your home and consider these people your people, like if this is your home, then build relationships, get to know some people, get on a ministry team where you can meet people on a different level, get on a ministry team where you can be a part of the bigger picture of helping us and others connect in a relationship. Because we are about relationships with one another, and we are about ultimately the relationship with Jesus, we want our time together here to be something our unconnected friends might enjoy. And so, and that requires relationships. And so if we're going to do that, if we're going to create an environment, which I hope we already have, if we're going to create an environment like that, there are 3 or 4 things I want to share with you that I think will help us do that and help them feel connected here. The first one is this: we need to be hospitable. Like the opposite of, this is just on Sunday mornings we're talking about, okay? Not really. We need to be hospitable all the time, but I'm specifically for this sermon talking about Sunday mornings, just to be clear. Okay, the opposite of hospitable is the church that Crossroads Chris walked into in the story I shared. It's a cold church. And a cold church doesn't care about people. They care about the morning program. And because they care about the morning program than they do about people, everyone is too busy to slow down and give a hug or shake a hand. They're too distracted to offer help or walk parents down the hall to show them the kids' check-in. A cold church is more interested in your sin, or in the sin that you commit, or what sin is your favorite, or which sin you commit most frequently. They're more interested in your sin than in you and your hurt and your pain and your struggle. Like a cold church expects you to get it together or have it together before they can accept you or befriend you. What we read in Scripture, though, is that Jesus was a friend of sinners. Jesus hung out with sinners and prostitutes and tax collectors and enemies often. So one of the ways that we intentionally try to connect with you and help you feel connected is by being hospitable, trying to be a warm church. And so we learn this from the very first church in the Bible, where it says about them in Acts chapter 2, verse 46, it says this first church, they would gather at the temple. They would gather in a gathering like this. And then it says they broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts. So they were invitational. They were hospitable. They opened up their homes. Now that sounds inviting, right? That sounds hospitable, which that happens best, that kind of hospitality and that kind of connection happens best in life groups that meet in homes. And so if you really want to connect deeply, if you really want to grow and get to know people who will help you grow, you need to get into a life group that meets in homes during the week. But we also try to recreate that the best we can in this big group setting here on Sunday mornings. So I want this to be a place where you feel like you've walked into someone's home, minus the couch. We don't have a couch, but we do have a big screen TV, right? I want you to feel a little bit like this is home. We've got people here who are waiting for you at the door. We have a real guy named Troy and his team who are really hospitable compared to the guy at the other church. When you walk in, grab a donut and coffee and just hang out for a minute. A new ministry that we've started is the ushers ministry inside this room. Like we are outgrowing this room. I'll talk about that in just a few minutes. And so finding seats can be a little bit difficult if you come in a little bit late. And by the way, it is okay to come in late. It's okay. You can come in late here and not get looked at or frowned upon. But we're outgrowing this room, and so our ushers are here at the door to help you find a seat. Because when you walk in, you can't see the side of the room. And so we want to be hospitable and help you find a seat easily. We want this to feel like home. The second thing I think that's going to help us foster an environment that unconnected people enjoy attending is fun. All right, I want us to be in some ways a fun church. Now, the opposite of fun obviously is boring and dull. Now, there would be some people, some very sharp, smart Christian people who would argue with me on fun. Should a church be fun? They might even fight with me on whether or not church should be fun. They would say church shouldn't be fun. Church should be about Jesus. And what they're saying when they say that is Jesus is boring. I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all. That's kind of, but I know what they're saying. That's kind of how they treat it. We need to be solemn and somber and respectful and serious because Jesus demands that or expects that. And so I understand what they're saying. There is a time when we get together for reverence and for quiet and for reflection and for seriousness. Like our sin and our need for a Savior, Jesus, that's the most important and serious thing in the world. But Jesus' resurrection and our salvation, that's worth celebrating. Like we have every reason to celebrate and to be filled with joy and laughter. So with that being said, if we are about relationships here, I don't know about you, but I grow closer to you when I have fun with you. Now, that's not the only way. I grow closer to you when we go through difficult times together, when I walk with you through a struggle in your life. We grow closer together when we work together and serve together. So having fun isn't the only way, but it is a way, maybe even an important way, I think, for us to grow closer together. When we have fun together, we grow together. Like there's something about fun that builds relationships. Like over Christmas break, even in our families, over Christmas break, my family, we played cards and we played board games while the kids were home from school. And at one point, we walked across the street to our neighbors around New Year's, and we played cards and other games, and we talked trash. And whoever would win would get up and do their victory dance and talk trash. That's just what we do. Like my victory dance is I stand up and I march to my high school fight song. Right? I stand up and walk around the room. But anyway, that's just what I do, right? I think that's a big, not marching to my high school fight song, but having fun is a big, healthy part of family. Like laughter, in my opinion, you might disagree, is healthy. It bonds us. So one of my Sunday morning goals is to make you laugh. At least try to make you smile while you're here with corny jokes or stories or whatever. Because I think what that does is it helps bring down our guard and our defenses, and it lightens us up. Because I don't want us to be cold. I don't want us to be stiff. I don't want us to be a boring church. And not that wearing a suit is boring. I know some guys who wear suits every Sunday that are preachers, and they're hilarious. And they're engaging, and they're compelling teachers. But I'll never wear a suit here. Why? Because in my opinion, this isn't a business meeting, right? If I wear a suit, the only time I wear a suit, listen, and I've got two of them, is to marry and bury, right? That's the only time I wear a suit. So that's the only time. That's the only time. Like, I want us to have fun together at the right time. And I want us to laugh and I want us to smile. Like Christmas Sunday. I talked about abundant life. And as I talked about life abundantly, life overflowing, we had Courtney and her team. Courtney that did announcements. Her and her team wrapped like 150 presents, just to kind of make the illustration. Kind of at the end of the sermon, we opened up the curtains and unveiled this abundant pile of gifts that represent what we're missing out if we only live for this life and not for the life to come. Like there's this, and so we're sitting around. So they wrapped these 150 like presents, and some of them are gigantic. I mean, they're big boxes and little boxes, and we're sitting at the office. I'm like, how could we, So at the end of the service, when it's all said and done, we're just going to throw these nicely wrapped gifts away. That's not fun. So we talked about it, and so we decided to put a gift in every single box. I think it was a silver dollar. And so at the end of the service, we just said, hey, if you're under the age of, if you're fifth grade or younger, we got a present for you. Come open a present. And kids walked out with a giant box. Now, it was hilarious. It made me smile. I thought it was a great idea. It made me smile because kids are opening up these presents that are bigger than them. But it was great, right? Why'd we do that? Just for fun. Just because we can. Just to make your kids smile. Just to have a laugh, right? Psalm 126, 2-3 says this. Our mouths were filled with laughter, our tongues with songs of joy. Then it was said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us, and we are filled with joy. Like, we have every reason to celebrate. We have every reason to have fun and to be filled with joy. Laughter can be medicine for the soul, but laughter can also be proof that we love each other, that we're comfortable with each other, and that we're relational. It can also be proof, according to this passage that we just read, that God has done great things in us or is doing great things here, and I believe he is. Like, if we ever stop laughing together for very long, wouldn't we think that's a problem? So I want us to be a part of a church. I want us to be a church. I want to be a part of a church that lets its guard down and does things like throw birthday parties with Buddy the Bat, right? Back at our September birthday party, Buddy the Bat just showed up. And it takes silly pictures and photo booths together like this. Like, there's a time to be serious, but there's, somebody put a meme to that. No, don't. No, do not. There's a time to be serious, and there's also a time to have fun. Fun is appropriate even here. Thirdly, if we're going to be a church that unconnected people enjoy attending, we have to be unified. We have to be unified. We have to be a unified church. Like, have you ever been out with another couple? Like, you and your spouse, you and your mate go out with another couple, and during dinner, the other couple begins to have a disagreement and argue right in front of you. Have you ever had that happen? Awkward, right? Like, it just like you're like, oh, what do we do right now? Do we say anything? Do we just sit here and stare? And it's like watching it's awkward. Have you ever had that happen? What's even worse is being that couple that has fought in front of others, right? And Val and I have been that. We've done that. We've destroyed evenings with our own little like disagreements. Really awkward when that happens. But here's what I'm saying. Relationships are tough, right? Marriage is tough. Relationships are tough. Relationships are messy. And sometimes in our weak moments, the tension between you and me causes everyone to feel tense and awkward. Like, that's just part of relationships. You and I are broken, we're sinful and selfish people in need of a Savior. And sometimes our selfishness or weaknesses just bubble up to the surface and they put people on their heels. Sometimes it even hurts the other person. That's gonna happen. That's gonna happen here. And so not if it does, but when it does, when that happens, when you have tension with another person here, someone has to be the bigger person. Like someone has to let Christ lead them rather than let their own selfish desires or defensive desires lead them. Like someone has to show up and listen rather than lash back. Someone has to be the bigger person and make the follow-up phone call and say, can we talk? How can we work this out? Or even apologize if needed. Like, and here's why. Here's why that needs to happen here. One, because that's what grace does. That's what Jesus did for us. But here's why as well. Relationships. If we are about relationships, listen to this. Relationships are not something you just walk away from when you get your feelings hurt. That's not how relationships are intended to work. Relationships require grace. Relationships require you to return and pursue that person even though you may not feel like it. So you don't just walk out at the first sign of conflict. And this happens at churches all the time. Like someone doesn't get their way, or someone doesn't feel like they're heard, or someone gets offended, and then rather than make a phone call to try to talk it out, they just leave. And it's easy to leave because there are plenty of other churches in town to choose from. So it's easy to walk out. But to walk out and never have a face-to-face conversation with the person that you have a problem with, to never offer a chance to make amends, that's not relationship. That's not relationship. On the other side, maybe it's that they walk out. The other side is this. You get your feelings hurt, or you feel strongly about something so much so that instead of walking out, what you do is you strike back, you lash out, you air out your problems publicly for everyone else except for the person you have a problem with. Like, that's not relationship either. What that is campaigning, and that turns to gossip. There's no room for gossip here because we're about relationships, and there's no room for gossip in relationships. Gossip has no place in the church because what gossip does is it divides the church. And it makes it awkward and it makes it uncomfortable for us all, especially our friends that we would like to invite here. Ephesians 4:1-5 says this. As a prisoner for the Lord, it's a guy named Paul writing. He's in prison. He says, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. Be completely humble and gentle, be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. There is one body, one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all, through all, and in all. Look, there's too many people in here for us to all agree on everything. And so I don't expect us to. Like, I don't expect you to just blindly agree with me on everything. But I hope that if we have a disagreement, we can have a civil conversation, a humble, listening, gentle, patient talk in love that's just between you and I. Like it's our problem that we are trying to work out. And in the end, even if we can't come to full agreement, like if our ideas just clash, we can still love each other. And here's where we find our common ground. This is what this passage is saying. Our common bond, our common purpose is Christ above all things. Christ above our own opinions, Christ above our preferences, Christ above all things. And so with that, our unity then speaks volumes about what Christ is doing here and what Christ is doing in us. Like our unity keeps us from being or feeling or making things awkward. Like if I could put this in the simplest of terms, like you and me, we're like peanut butter and jelly for Jesus Christ, right? That's how we need to be. Like the church is people. You are the church. We are the church. And so even if you're here visiting for the first time, our desire is to treat you like family, even if you're not there with us yet. Even if you're not there yet feeling like family. Like my own mode of operation or the kind of the way when I walk in here on Sunday mornings, what's going through my mind, and I say this to myself often, is this: I want strangers to become my friends, and I want my friends to become family. Ultimately, part of the family of God through Jesus Christ. This is us. If your family, if you consider this your family, then I hope you're asking, what can I do to help make this happen? Well, I hope there are ideas reeling through your mind, like, here's what I'm going to do to help make this happen. What can I do to make this place what we desire it to be? What can I do to help strangers become friends and help friends become family? And we serve with this in mind. All right? Let me pray. Father God, thank you for teaching us, for leading us, and continuing to grow us. Thank you for not giving up on us. Thank you for showing us that we're worth it to you through Jesus Christ. In your Son's name we pray. Amen. All right. Band can come on up. Two things I want to end with. One, if you've been like a friend of this place for a while and you're ready to become family, one of the things that we think ought to happen is you get baptized. If you're ready to get baptized, if you've been thinking about that, or if you have questions about that, see me after the service, message me sometime this week from our Facebook page or our website or whatever, because we want you to become family. We want to help you follow Jesus and follow Jesus well. He's worth it. The second thing I want to share with you is the announcement. Did anybody know there was going to be did anybody see or hear that there's going to be a big announcement today? Okay. Here's what I know. We are outgrowing this gym quickly. And so for the last 6 or 8 months, we've been trying to get ahead of that and try to figure out where do we go next? What do we do next? Where do we meet next? Will we relocate? Will we build? Will we go to two services? What will we do next? And what's happened is at the same time, as a church, we have been operating on a shoestring budget, okay? Meaning we don't spend very much money at all. I mean, we don't spend much at all. And at the same time, you have been very, very generous and have been open-handed with your tithes and offerings. And so we have a very large, hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in a bank account ready for us when we're ready to relocate. And so as of today, as of this week, we have a contract on a new facility, new to us. We have a contract on a building in town, the Main Street building. You know what I'm talking about? The old roller rink. Yeah. Yep. And we can afford it. As we get down the road, I'll share with you our numbers. For those of you who are interested, I'll introduce you to the team that has led us to this point. But for now, we are planning and working toward the purchase of this building and the 2 acres that are behind it, like the whole deal. And that's an exciting thing. Like we are on the move. That's who we are. God is doing incredible things. He's blessed us in ways far beyond what we imagined He would in the time frame, how quickly He's done it. And so we have 90 days to get our ducks in a row to a degree. So surveys, inspections, getting our finances in order, or getting with a lender. We have 90 days to get an architect to get all this in order. Now, what that means is if it all works out at the end of 90 days, we will have purchased a building. It doesn't mean we will be moving into a building. There will be about 9 months then of build out, remodeling to do. So it won't be till maybe January 2020 before we move in. But here's what I'm asking. For the next 90 days, I want to ask you to be praying about that. And I want to ask you, if you, on your way to work or on your way home from work, if you pass that building, leave for work 5 minutes early and take a loop around that building and say a prayer. I just want us to circle the building and circle that little campus with prayer for the next 90 days, that God would show. Maybe he doesn't want us to purchase that, and that will be okay. He'll have something better for us. But if it's his will, whatever his will may be, we just ask that you pray around that campus. Celebrate it, dream about what could happen there, how lives will be transformed there. We're already kind of in dream mode in some ways with it, but that's exciting, I think. So yeah, be praying about that, and we'll let you know as we go along what's happening, okay?